Hi, my name is Bradley Burk. I'm a financial advisor here in our Charlotte, North Carolina office at Modera Wealth Management. I've been with Modera for a little over 3 years now, and I've been asked to give a presentation on elder financial abuse. Some have coined it the crime of the 21st century. It's really important in our industry and among our clients, and we felt that was important to provide an educational webinar for your benefit. It's a tough topic to talk about, but we feel that it's important to provide information, guidance, and just overall learning so that you can be well equipped and prepared if you ever come across something like this. The title of the presentation is Elder Financial Abuse. Other terms for it are financial exploitation or fraud, so I'll use those terms interchangeably, as well as elder. There's also other words, senior or older American. Those words I'll probably use interchangeably as well. Just as a reminder, this is not legal advice. This is not investment advice. This is for educational purposes only, and we hope to provide you some benefit. So at the beginning of this presentation, I just wanted to share two important quotes that I felt highlighted the theme of this difficult topic, elder financial abuse, which is really about someone taking advantage of a vulnerable person. So the first quote, attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, says, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." The second quote, which is attributable to Pearl Buck, she's the first American woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, says, "Our society must make it right and possible for old people not to fear the young or be deserted by them. For the test of a civilization is the way it cares for its helpless members." I think those two quotes really highlight the theme surrounding elder financial abuse, which is a vulnerable individual or person can be taken advantage of by systems in our society, by those around them, and strangers. So for this webinar, we just have a few main things we want to go through, and it's laid out on this agenda here. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to review what we talk about at the end. So hopefully this provides you some education, a foundation for elder financial abuse, why it's happening, why it's so important. To go through the who, the what, the when, and the how of it. And then looking forward, what do we do about it? How can we spot it? And how do we prevent it in the future? So, what is financial elder abuse? Why is it happening? And why has it become so prevalent? Really, it's become the crime of the 21st century. And there's four main factors I wanted to highlight that led to the increase in this crime. The first is demographics. Our country is growing older, we're living longer, and it creates a larger pool of individuals who are susceptible to this financial elder abuse. As we've talked about in other webinars, there are some health-related effects of aging. As we get older, there's something called cognitive decline that just has a way of making us more susceptible to something like this. And our area of expertise is the financial and retirement trends that older Americans are facing. And lastly, ever-evolving technology is another factor, and now including artificial intelligence, which I know you've heard probably a lot about in the news recently. The Government Accountability Office estimates that $2.9 billion is lost annually due to elder financial abuse, but those numbers can vary drastically and increase very quickly. Elder financial abuse often goes unrecognized and underreported for a variety of reasons we'll talk about. And it has become one of the most common forms of elder abuse. It's really a tough topic to discuss just because when a senior is deprived of their financial resources, it can take away their independence and their dignity. When they don't have the funds to pay for food, gas, utilities, those things can deprive the senior not only of resources, but of independence, and can cause shame and embarrassment. So getting into the first factor that has increased the prevalence of this financial elder abuse is, as I said, demographics. As you can see here, these next few slides are from the US Census taken in 2020, and how this first one is how our nation's population has changed. As you can see, there's a larger number of people over the age of 65, up from 12.4% in 2000 to almost 17% in 2020. That means 1 in 6 of us is over the age of 65, and it makes it more likely that we are susceptible to something like elder financial abuse. And the country is continuing to get older. This next slide shows the percentage of the population aged 65 to 84 and where they're moving and living. The East Coast remains predominantly older, and states such as Florida, Maine, Vermont have large percentages of people over the age of 65. This is some more descriptive facts and figures about the specific locations that people over the age of 65 are moving to. As you can see, a lot in Florida, Arizona, Maine, even North Carolina. As you can see here, again, from the US Census Bureau, from 1900 to 2060, some projections suggest that we could have almost 95 million Americans over the age of 65. What this really means is that the likelihood of elder financial abuse is going to continue as more of us phase into that stage of our lives. Finally, the number of Americans that are age 65 and older is projected to increase about 47%. And the total population age 65 and older is expected to grow from 17% to 23%. So that 1 in 6 number is going to be closer to 1 in 5 number. Finally, people age 85 and older are projected to triple from about 6.7 million to 19 million over the coming decades. Demographics is a huge factor in this. The second factor is cognitive decline. It's particularly those over the age of 85. Almost a third suffer from some sort of dementia, memory loss. Really, when it comes to cognitive decline, there's 2 major factors. One is what's called our fluid intelligence. It's our ability to take data, apply rules, and make decisions, complex decisions. Some say that tends to peak around age 50. And then we have something called crystallized intelligence, which is our wisdom, our life experience, and the stores of knowledge we have. It's said that that peaks around age 70. So age 70 really becomes what some have described as the cognitive danger zone, where complex decisions are harder to make. We make them slower. Our memory fades or even fails. We have trouble remembering recent past. And as we know, cognitive decline can happen slowly or it can happen all at once. We just don't know. One of the major contributing factors to cognitive decline, as we've talked about, is social isolation. Social isolation is the removal of a senior from social circles, from the community, from friends and family, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. As of 2020, a little over a quarter of adults age 65 and older lived alone. Some red flags of cognitive decline that are worth pointing out are confusion and loss of general knowledge regarding basic financial terms, the inability to appreciate the consequences of decisions, or the inability to understand the complexity of decisions, unkept appearance, new friends. Those kinds of things can also present as red flags of cognitive decline. Finally, making decisions that are inconsistent with a person's long-term goals could be a red flag as well. The third contributing factor to the prevalence of elder financial abuse is current financial and retirement trends. Baby boomers, as you see here, currently have wealth that's estimated at about 12 times that greater than millennials. And those baby boomers are entering their older age and that cognitive danger zone that we talked about. Retirement is also still a relatively new social concept. And now retirement is being thrust upon us as individuals to manage for ourselves. That transition from a defined benefit retirement, such as pensions, is now a defined contribution retirement structure, 401ks, IRAs, and the like, forcing the individual to self-manage and the onus upon them to manage their whole financial life in retirement. As you can see on the screen, somewhat ironically, though, poor elderly individuals are even at a greater risk of financial abuse. That's more alluding to the fact that their friends and family around them may be even of a worse situation, and therefore they become susceptible to something like elder financial abuse. The fourth contributing factor, as we've talked about, is the ever-evolving technological landscape we find ourselves in. We are definitely reaping the benefits of technology with smartphones and instant transactions online, automation in having bank accounts drafted to pay the bills without even worrying about it. However, with technology comes the ease to commit crime. As you see here, we've also added a line item for artificial intelligence. That has allowed perpetrators of frauds of many kinds to become even better at tricking people or manipulating individuals to do something that they wouldn't normally do. Deep fake artificial intelligence, personalized phishing attempts, and something called an automated fraud factory driven by AI has made it even easier and cheaper for people to try to commit these crimes against our senior individuals. So, what is elder financial abuse? How do we identify it? What are some examples? That's what we're going to talk about next. So, very broadly speaking, elder financial abuse typically happens to someone over the age of 60 or 65. It's typically perpetrated by someone they trust, a family member, a caregiver, a friend, but it could be someone that they don't even know. It could be a stranger. It's the unauthorized use of the senior individual's finances, assets, or property, whether illegal or improper, and we'll get into some specifics on this in a moment, that ultimately causes harm to the senior, whether that be financial loss, emotional distress, or dependence on the abuser. The American Bankers Association defines elder financial abuse as the illegal, unauthorized, or improper use of a senior's person's funds, property, or assets, which deprives them of their resources and then deprives them of their independence. As we said before, without the resources to pay for things in society, a senior's dignity and independence can also be taken from them. So kind of diving into the elements of financial abuse, elder financial abuse, it's really someone in a position of trust or confidence with an older adult who knowingly, by deception or intimidation, uses their funds, assets, or property to deprive that older adult. These are some elements, and we're going to kind of talk through some more specifics. I think one of the big things to highlight is consent. Is the senior individual engaging in an act or transaction financially related that they've consented to, that they've freely and willingly acted on their own. That's that by deception or intimidation. When someone deceives the senior into acting or making a transaction, though they've given consent, the deceit has kind of overridden that consent. Also, we have to ask ourselves, did the senior have the mental capacity to engage in that transaction? We talked about cognitive decline. So there comes a point where we may not have the mental capacity to make these decisions on our own. Did we have true knowledge of the fact? Did we understand the complex decision we made? And finally, did we act freely and voluntarily? All those kind of factor into, was consent given to the nature of the transaction? The next topic is a little gray as well. It's something called undue influence. And this is as well by that intimidation element. Undue influence is similar to brainwashing. It's manipulating and coercing someone so hard that essentially you overcome their free will. You push and push and push until they acquiesce. We have unduly influenced them to take an action. Excessive persuasion is another way to put it. And this is really hard because it often doesn't happen in plain sight. It often happens behind closed doors, and it's something that happens over time. It doesn't happen all at once and can be very hard to notice. It may only be noticed until the action is taken by the senior, and then it's uncovered that over time, the perpetrator was influencing the senior to take some action financially. There's this interesting bank training video where a daughter and a father walk arm in arm into the bank branch. And the father, a senior, doesn't say a word to the teller, but the daughter says, "My father would like to withdraw a large sum of money from his account." The bank teller handles the situation, seemingly with the consent of the father to withdraw the money, but it's really the daughter who is coercing excessively her father to take some action that may not be in her father's best interest. That's just an example. It's worth noting that elder financial abuse is often accompanied with another form of elder abuse. So that's why we termed this hybrid elder abuse. And it's just to highlight that more than one exploitation could be occurring at the same time, whether it be financial and emotional, financial and physical abuse, or psychological abuse accompanying some financial abuse. So it's worth noting that being aware of financial abuse could lead to the prevention of something else that is occurring as well. So I've already given some examples, but what does it look like? Like I said, withdrawing large sums of money from a bank or an investment account frequently, unusually, when a client may not have access to investment statements or funds in a new investment, forging signatures, whether illegally that the perpetrator forges the senior's signature or coerces them so much, causing them to sign, but as we said, under that influence. Transferring property via deeds to unusual people at unusual times against the senior's kind of long-term goals or objectives. Changes of beneficiaries, either in an estate plan or on retirement accounts, insurance policies, bank accounts. Donations to fake charities. This is more of a elder financial fraud, where someone may establish a charity in order to elicit donations from seniors thinking they are providing some benefit to the charity. As we said, changing wills or trusts against the client's, or excuse me, against the senior's best interest or against what is generally thought to have been their wishes. The misuse of a power of attorney, a contractor billing for unnecessary or uncompleted work, thinking that the senior will not catch them or come after them in any way. And in our line of work, selling inappropriate or predatory financial products, such as insurance, mortgages, or other investments. Finally, frauds or scams by strangers or people unfamiliar with the senior via telephone, email, internet, etc. So that's kind of what it looks like, but what are the signs? Like, what would allow us to maybe be more aware that something could be going on? A senior or elder person has unpaid bills or unopened mail. Dramatic changes in their spending habits. Very different from what is usual. A sudden lack of communication with the person. You're no longer able to speak to them or reach them. Poor financial decision making, just generally. Something that the senior's not used to doing. Deteriorating physical health or appearance. Moving away from existing relationships toward new relationships. All of a sudden, this new person enters the senior's life and is all of a sudden present at major events or present all the time. Display of unexplained or unusual excitement over a financial windfall. This is kind of known as the lottery, scam, or someone being secretive about potentially winning something. An unusual degree of depression, fear, anxiety. All these kind of allude to the mental health of a senior who may be suffering from other abuses. Finally, you're unable to speak directly with the victim. And in this case, the perpetrator speaks for the victim. So who are the perpetrators of elder financial abuse? Obviously, it can be friends, families, neighbors. It could be professionals, lawyers, doctors, financial advisors, clergy, caregivers. And it can be strangers, telemarketers, vendors, contractors. But as you can see here, there is one study that says family members are the most likely to commit financial elder abuse. And as I've put on screen, exploitation is usually the term for when the victim knows the perpetrator. Fraud is usually used to describe the situation where the victim does not know the perpetrator. So this generalization of a perpetrator of elder financial abuse was provided by the National Center on Elder Abuse. And this is just meant to be a generalization. The average age of a perpetrator of this kind of crime was found to be around 45. One study found that 62% were men. Between a third and 2/3 were unemployed, a motivating factor to commit a crime like this. Approximately 70% were unmarried. 30% had financial problems or were financially dependent in some way. Again, another motivating factor. And I thought this one was really important to point out that between 53 and 64% of victims and perpetrators cohabitated. Again, going back to the fact that it's often committed by someone very close to the victim, sometimes people who are living in the same residences with the victim. So who are the victims and what profiles can we kind of put to them? The first one is the financial prisoner profile, which is someone who's physically or emotionally dependent on a caregiver or a family member, and it's that person who is exploiting them financially. The next one is the slipping elder, is someone who's just having more difficult, whether via cognitive decline or not, of handling their own finances, of understanding the whole picture. The confused elder is someone who may be unaware of the changes going on around them, especially in their financial life. Things change quite often. The bereaved widow or widower. This is a profile of someone who, in a relationship, in a marriage, may not have handled the finances and is all of a sudden thrust into the role of having to handle the finances and maybe relying upon others to teach them and help them and lean on them. That just provides an opportunity for that person to be taken advantage of because they haven't filled that role previously. Finally, the fifth one is the unknowing elder, someone who may feel that they are being exploited, but they're embarrassed or ashamed to speak up, or they just don't believe that the person close to them is the one exploiting them financially. But it's important to point out that anyone can be a victim. These are profiles that tend to sprout up when you look across the elder financial abuse landscape. So what are some factors that cause victims to maybe be more susceptible to this kind of exploitation? Obviously, chronic medical and physical conditions can cause someone to be at a higher risk to becoming a victim. Cognitive impairments, as we've talked about. As we age, we lose kind of that healthy skepticism and are less likely to report changes, differences than what we expected. Limited social support, as we talked about, social isolation is a big factor. Not having that network of community, friends, and family around a senior can cause them to be more susceptible to something like this. Financial dependence, as well as stress and poor coping mechanisms, can lead seniors to just be more susceptible and to appear to be an easier target to perpetrators. So, as we've talked about, this is kind of a crime of opportunity. It's really where, it's motivated and a vulnerability collide, where someone is motivated to take advantage of a senior who may be vulnerable, and this crime can occur. So, when we talk about a crime of opportunity, what are some of the opportunities that an individual may look to exploit? Seniors tend to have a little bit more money or assets or property. They may own their house outright, and that's often motivated by greed. Seniors are often at home more, so they're often accessible. The perpetrator may know where they're going to be at any time during the day. Seniors may be socially isolated, especially if living alone. They may have memory or cognitive decline. And they begin to trust, maybe more quickly or more deeply, individuals around them. That could lead to the opportunity of financial abuse arising. I think it's also important to point out that the increase in elder financial abuse tends to happen around important points during the year. Tax season is a big one. When we're talking about money, we're filing taxes. There's a lot of personal information being passed around to people we trust, our CPAs, our advisors, but also our friends and family. Holidays, when we're giving to friends and family, when we're giving to charities, can be seen as an opportunity for people to take advantage of. And then finally, current events and natural disasters. There was a story a few years ago about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in which several fake charities sprouted up. and seniors were more likely to contribute money and assets to those fake charities, thinking they were providing a benefit to the humanitarian, efforts there, but really it was a financial fraud committed via the internet, via technology, by strangers. A few of the common fraud schemes I just wanted to point out are listed here, whether it be a new romance in a senior's life, whether it be family that has come back into the senior's life at a very opportune time. I put the IRS and the government up here. The IRS will never call you. They send letters. The IRS has seen a drastic increase in scam and fraud opportunities, trying to get access to people's funds and property. Tech support, someone calling to say they've been, sent to update your spam or antivirus software on your computer. The lottery is another one. Emergencies, a family member calling saying they have an emergency and need money, could be a common fraud scheme. The next few slides are examples of different kinds of elder financial abuse. And I just kind of want to go through one by one with you to give you an idea of what you may see. This one, John and Bernice have a second marriage. John worked as an engineer. Bernice stayed at home. They had recently purchased 22 acres of property for a second home. And Bernice asked John to add one of her sons to the property deed. While John was on a business trip, Bernice faxed John the last 3 pages of the deed for signature. He promptly signed and returned them. And unknowingly, he had signed a deed over to Bernice's son, gifting him the property. This is exploitation. Was consent given? John signed the paperwork. However, it begs the question, did John know what he was signing? Was he fully informed? Did he act freely, or was it by deception? This one by an adult child. Joseph and Malvina, older individuals, have taken in their daughter. Soon after, they find out that she's racked up thousands upon thousands of dollars of credit card debt in their name. And they are stuck having to pay this debt back. Another case of financial fraud committed by a family member who they were attempting to help. Here's another interesting example. Barbara, a high-ranking federal government employee, she lived alone. She was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she asked her former neighbor, Margie, to help her, to care for her, and she would provide Margie with the food and housing for her. However, she came to find out that Margie, using a power of attorney, had essentially taken over her accounts and put things in her name. Again, misusing a power of attorney can cause a lot of issues. Finally, this example is that emergency scam, essentially, which is Charlie, age 82, receives a call from a prison or sheriff's office that his grandson is in trouble and needs to be bailed out of jail. However, fines and bail need to be paid. Money needs to be sent. Come to find out, this has all been a scam. If the money is sent, financial fraud probably has occurred. This final example is a CPA who's taken advantage of wealthy clients, filling out tax documents, using investment statements to complete tax forms and the like. Alex's clients gave him power of attorney. He also served as their financial advisor. Come to realize, one of the client's sons learns that his dad's house is in his dad's CPA's name. Again, probably financial abuse. So where do we go from here? What can we do? One of the big things, as we talked about, is social isolation of seniors. So from the National Council on Aging, here are some ideas to curb social isolation. Communicate with the individual or individuals. Engage in social activities. Explore hobbies and areas of interest within the community. And then contact outside support organizations if necessary. AARP lists several ways to prevent elder financial abuse. Appoint a responsible financial or durable power of attorney. Appoint trusted contacts when possible. Use a reputable financial tracking service so you can stay up to date and then understand when and where things are. As we said, stay in touch and avoid that social isolation, and get to know the caregivers, both the senior as well as the senior's family, to understand who will be with the person. Other ways to prevent elder financial abuse: trust your instincts. Keep personal information personal, safeguard financial information. Hang up the phone if you don't recognize who it is or don't understand what's going on. Don't respond to email unless you know who it is and what's going on. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to ask for help, to understand, and be prepared to say no. So what does Modera do as our clients' financial advisors? First, we get to know our clients and their families intimately. We communicate frequently via email, phone, in person. We maintain trusted contacts if possible. As part of our service, we review beneficiaries and estate plans, plans for cognitive decline, plans for surviving spouses, surviving beneficiaries. If we suspect financial abuse, we report that to our compliance team. We may delay requested disbursements of money from certain accounts for up to 15 days if we suspect. And then as a fiduciary, we are required to report reasonably suspected financial abuse of our clients over the age of 65 to the respective adult protective services. Finally, what can you do? Understanding the problem, why it's become a problem, what to look for, identifying those vulnerable people and the risk factors that cause them to become more vulnerable, and the opportunities that may be present, spotting red flags and potential perpetrators. Having honest conversations, I think, is hugely important. Being open and communicating as openly and honestly as possible about those things with those that you trust intimately. Assume it could happen to you. We may all experience cognitive decline and could be vulnerable to something like this. And if it comes to the point where you believe something is wrong, reporting is huge. According to the SEC, for every one case of elder financial abuse that is reported, close to 24 to 44 go unreported. So upwards of 96% of cases go unreported. Why? Often the victim is embarrassed. They feel loyalty or love to the person who may have committed the crime against them, likely a family member, a friend, a close acquaintance. They may fear retaliation. They may be suffering from that hybrid elder abuse that we talked about, multiple abuses happening at once. They may be dependent on this person or people and therefore afraid to report it. They may be in denial or blame themselves. Or ultimately, they may not understand what's happening. So reporting financial elder abuse is extremely important. It's very hard. It takes a village. It takes advisors, physicians, neighbors, friends, family, everyone in that individual's life to be there for that person. But it's so hard to spot unless you're aware of the signs. Obviously, this is a crime potentially and can be reported to local law enforcement. Finally, it can be reported to Adult Protective Services in the jurisdiction that the individual lives. Here in North Carolina, where I am, that's the North Carolina Division of Aging and Adult Services. But there are lots of resources out there for people. So in summary, elder financial abuse has kind of been coined the crime of the 21st century. Why? Because it has become so prevalent with us living longer, thanks to medicine, technology. The retirement trends that we're seeing, elder Americans are the wealthiest we've ever seen. It's a crime of opportunity, and people are taking advantage of that opportunity. Again, what is it? It's the unauthorized use of an older individual's money, property, or assets. Again, that can be seen as just illegal acts, forging signatures, changing accounts, or it can be by that excessive persuasion or undue influence, where the perpetrator pushes so hard and uses their influence to an extent that causes the senior to take an action that they might not otherwise have. Be aware that it happens and be on the lookout for those signs and flags. Hopefully this presentation gave you a foundation for that. And then take appropriate action if needed. Contact authorities, contact other members of the senior's family, and maybe it can be stopped. Here are some other resources that might be of interest to you after reviewing this presentation. And finally, as always, from your friends at Modera Wealth, our disclosures, and you can have just a moment to read those. Thank you for participating in this webinar. I hope you took something from it and look forward to seeing you next time.